Hey, spinnerbaits are one of the very first bass fishing lures. They've been around forever, but that doesn't mean everybody knows how to fish them. I'm gonna show you how to fish a spinnerbait, why you need to fish a spinnerbait, and you know what? Chatterbaits are the new hottest rage. They are awesome lures, but they're still not a spinnerbait. Now, a spinnerbait is a lure with 1 or 2 or 3 or more blades on the upper arm, and then there's some sort of lead or tungsten jig head on the bottom portion, and this is what they call a safety pin style. The very early versions of spinnerbaits were from actual safety pins, which I think is crazy. And then it's got the hook on the bottom and a skirt that pulses as the blades spin around. That skirt pulses, and that's one of the things that helps make them bite it. But the spinnerbait, like I said, it is extremely versatile. You can fish it just under the surface, or you can throw it out, let it sink, and get all the way down to the bottom. And that's one of the good things. It has a great depth range that it's effective fishing. Now, most of the time I'm fishing a spinnerbait, it's going to be around slightly stained to stained or muddy water. It's a great bait in off-colored water because of that bait vibration. But you know, that's one of the reasons I really like that spinnerbait, is that vibration. That is what triggers those bass to bite for whichever reason, whether it's territorial or they can find the bait. They will absolutely truck that vibration, and it can be effective in very clear water as well. But in clear water, you're going to need to burn it faster. Fish it a lot faster, and that can be more effective in the clear water. But we're going to start out with exactly how to fish it. I'm gonna start from top and work my way down. Now, you can take a spinnerbait and reel it just under the surface and make that spinnerbait kind of affect the top of the water. That's what they call waking a spinnerbait. It works great fishing it over top of grass. It also is really good when the fish are feeding in an upward pattern in that stained water. They're wanting that bait to be up, but maybe not on the surface. You can take that spinnerbait, you can throw it out there, and you can keep it, I mean, it is just an inch or so under the surface, and you can see the water a little bit is starting to get affected. That's how you can fish it right up under the surface just like that. And then as you're fishing it, you're waking it, keeping it right up near the surface. You can kind of start and stop your reel just a little bit. Just kind of start and stop your reel. If you want to, you can make it splash the top of the water like that. That's an old Jimmy Houston trick right there. Jimmy Houston trick. When he's waking his spinnerbait, he likes to let that one blade pop over the top occasionally, and then keep it right up there under the surface. That's just like a bait fish getting up near the surface and then kind of flicking and coming out of the water. That's what that kind of mimics. So waking a spinnerbait, that's kind of what it does right there. You can just let your blade kind of pop like that, draws them up to the top. That's how you want to fish it, right there under the surface. Now, next is you want to fish it somewhere in the middle of the water column. As you're doing that, that is extremely effective for me around boat docks, around bushes, around laydowns, things like that, to where you don't want it on the bottom, but you want it halfway between the surface and the bottom. And so I'm going to throw out there, and then I'm going to let it sink. And what I do is I'm going to as soon as that bait hits, I'm going to pop it. Just pop it a little bit to get the blades turning up top, and it turns the spinnerbait upright. And then I'm going to kind of let it pendulum down to the depth that I want it to fish. So again, as I throw it out there, we kind of let it hit, let it pop, and then I'm going to start reeling it at a medium pace. You can speed it up. You can speed it up and slow it down. And what that does is it'll cause that spinnerbait skirt to flare. As you change the speed, it'll flare that skirt, it'll flatten it out, and then it'll puff it back out. It'll flare that spinnerbait skirt. That draws a ton of strikes with the spinnerbait. And when I'm fishing it in that middle of the water column, like I said, I like to be getting it in next to or around cover if possible, if I'm in that stained water. You know, if I see a stump over there under the surface, if I see a lay down, I'm going to take that spinnerbait and throw it right down there, and I can take and bump it off of one of those limbs. That also draws a lot of strikes. So I can just throw it out there, get those blades turning, bump that cover, adjust my speed that I'm reeling it, draw a lot of strikes. And then the other way, you can let that spinnerbait get all the way down to the bottom. It's only a couple feet deep right here, probably 3 or 4 feet right there. But I'm gonna throw it out there, and then I'm gonna get the blades turning. Then I'm gonna let it sink. I'm not gonna throw it out there and then just let it sink on its own. When you're fishing a spinnerbait, I feel like that a bait casting rod is by far the best way to go, because you can let that lure land exactly where you want it. You're not just throwing it out there and then letting it fall. If you're not familiar with the bait caster, you may want to check out one of my other videos to see how to learn to do that. But let's just go ahead and say that you know how to throw a bait caster. It is the way to go, because the sidearm roll cast is the way to do it. You can throw that spinnerbait out there and then just let it barely hit the water. You can control the cast because we're casting two targets. And then I think that a bait caster is much easier to find the right tempo when you're fishing a spinnerbait. I've tried all kind of different rod lengths. The shorter rods are okay, like a 6.6, but a 7 foot, just a 7 foot medium heavy action. This is a Cash and CRT rod, but something with this type of action to where you have a soft enough tip to where you can cast accurately, but it's kind of a medium to medium heavy type bend to it. That's what you want when you're fishing a spinnerbait. And what happens is when that spinnerbait's coming through the water, it allows that fish to suck the spinnerbait in and get it. And then, you know, it's got a big old, most small spinnerbaits have a big old gaff hook on them. And I fish my spinnerbaits anywhere from 16 to 20 pound test. 20 pound is almost a standard, almost my go-to, but I will drop down to 18 or 16 on occasions. Now I know some people that fish lighter line on spinnerbaits, they feel like it gets the spinnerbait a little extra action. I am not gonna knock that. Whatever works for you, by all means, definitely stick with that. But for me, a bait casting setup, 7 foot rod. I like the 6-3-to-1 reel. It's a Daiwa Tatula. Something that you can cast accurately. Drag is not a huge issue, but to be able to cast very accurately and cast far enough to be effective is also key when you're throwing the spinnerbait. I find you catch a lot of fish throwing it out there. Get those blades turning, so when that bait is sinking, it'll spin on the way down, and then I'm just going to slowly crawl it to where I can feel that bait bumping across the bottom. It's going to be kicking up a little bit of dirt. It's going to be bouncing against the bottom, and those blades are going to be spinning at the same time. That is usually a little more effective with, say, a ½ ounce or a 3/4 ounce or even a 1 ounce spinnerbait. A little heavier spinnerbait tends to bounce along the bottom real well. If you're going to be throwing it to try to wake that spinnerbait, you probably want something in the 3/8 ounce range is most effective. 1/4 ounce can do it, but usually a 1/4 ounce, you have smaller blades, doesn't wake as well. But that's real good for fishing real shallow waters, the smaller 1/4 ounce spinnerbaits. Now, I didn't mention blades and the types of blades, and there are a bunch of different types of blades out there. This is what they call a tandem. This is the round Colorado in front, and then a willow leaf on the back, and that's a tandem. That's probably the most common, probably the most versatile. You can fish that from top to bottom. If you're only going to have one combination, I like that tandem Colorado and willow leaf on there. And most spinnerbaits come with the proper size blades on the spinnerbait. Now this is a more compact spinnerbait, but this is an example of a double Colorado setup. I'm going to be going to that double Colorado setup more when I want the bait to slow down. The willow leaf blades have great flash, but they don't have as much resistance as the rounder Colorado blades. The rounder Colorado blades are going to slow your bait down. So when the more stain the water, the slower I want my bait to go. So those fish can find the spinnerbait and then grab it before it gets past them. Now in the clearer water, I'm going to be going to more of the willow leaf blade. So that willow leaf blade in water that's real clear, it's gonna allow that spinnerbait to run faster. And like I mentioned before, that's what you want. You want a little faster spinnerbait, or faster presentation in the clearer water. muddier, I want it slower. So that's why I'm going to go to more of those, more of that. And then, like I said, the tandem's kind of the mix of the two. Somewhat slow, good vibration, but also has the flash of the willow leaf blade. So that's kind of the mix you get with that tandem setup right there. And again, you know, top, middle, bottom with the spinnerbait is the way to think about it. You want to try the top, try the middle, try the bottom until you figure out where those fish are, and then that's going to be the most effective. Another place where spinnerbait really shine is in the springtime. Most lakes throughout the country, especially the middle part of the country in the south, has a big shad spawn right around when the bass spawns, right around that same time. It goes for about 6 or 8 weeks. First thing at night and first thing in the morning, a spinnerbait around floating docks or riprap rocks, wherever those shad are going to be spawning. A spinnerbait is by far my #1 go-to bait. So that's a little how-to on how to fish a spinnerbait. Hopefully you can pick up a few things, get your starter, but that's the starter. That's the fishing, how to fish a spinnerbait basics 101, whatever you want to call it. We're gonna have more advanced courses here, definitely coming at you. But hope you enjoyed that, and be sure to check out my other how-to videos on there and comment down there what you want to see.